there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com here with this week's episode of the Rogue's Alley. I'm going to go back to an old archetype that we did at the very start of the rotation from Battle for Zendikar and Shadows over Innistrad. I think it was the very first deck that I ran for playing on a budget, and I think that this deck could actually qualify for playing on a budget. I'll have to check the prices to see. I don't think that anything in this deck is very expensive, because we are going to take an archetype that used Weapons Trainer as our go-to aggro card, and then have a ton of equipments to get this sort of anthem effect with the Weapons Trainer, and try to swing in for lethal with Reckless Bushwhacker as quickly as possible. So this, I think it's a good time to be running red-white aggro. I think that we're in kind of a very self-regulating standard. We saw week one where everyone was on the vehicles deck, and then we saw vehicles get hated out with cards, especially the cards like Harness Lightning, and a lot of instant speed removal. We saw how bad Declaration in Stone was against like the vehicle-based decks because it cannot take care of the chopper. But I think that we're going to forego running the chopper in a list like this, and instead get our artifacts from cards like the equipments. And I thought I'd try out like this Artificer Tribal, because the Inventor's Goggles seems pretty good in a deck that can, there are multiple cards that can actually utilize the Inventor's Goggles quite well, and we'll talk about that in a second. So back to the self-regulating standard. We saw week one being red-white vehicles take the meta by storm. I think it was like 85% of the successful decks in top 8 were red-white vehicles or red-black aggro as well. And then we saw the Pro Tour, the Aetherworks Marvel decks just be everywhere, but then day 2 of the Pro Tour, the Aetherworks Marvel deck's not doing so hot, and the U-White Flash being the top dog deck. And now, that we're a few weeks even after the U-White Flash was the top deck, we are now into a green-black Delirium, which is almost exclusively the same deck that existed with the Eldritch Moon, kind of the Eldritch Moon breakout, Traverse the Ulvmald into Emrakul type decks that are utilizing the Delirium mechanic. And so I think that a deck like this does very well, especially since those decks have started to put in more cards like Murder and even Ruinous Path and To the Slaughter, and foregoing cards like Deadweight or early removal. And in fact, most of their quick removal is just going to be Grasp of Darkness to take care of the chopper. But again, since we're not using chopper, Grasp of Darkness is quite weak against just single target removal in this deck, as we have this kind of go wide type strategy. So let's just go down the deck tech. We are going to be running the equipments being Bone Saw and Inventor's Goggles. Why we want both of these is they cost 0 and 1 respectively. I thought about Captain's Claw. Captain's Claws have done well in the past, but I'm not sure the deck wants Captain Claws over Inventor's Goggles. I don't know if it has room for it. We might try some matchups we'll put in the Captain's Claw. It is easy to equip it, just 2 mana, and gives a creature +1/+1, and when you equip it, the attacking creature puts in a 1/1 core tapped and attacking, so off a Weapons Trainer it does get a buff. But again, in this type of match, I don't know if it's worthwhile, because we're going to be swinging for lethal as quickly as possible. So we're going to run Expedition Envoys. They're still a 2/1 for 1. We're also going to run the Stoneforge Acolyte, because this is still a little bit of an ally strategy. We have the Reckless Bushwhacker, the Weapons Trainers, the Acolytes, and the Expeditions. Then we have Toolcraft Exemplar and Inventor's Apprentice. Both of these, all of our 1-drops, except for the Expedition Envoy, are going to be Artificers. So if they come in after an Inventor's Goggles, they'll automatically get hooked up to Inventor's Goggles. And then a Stoneforge Acolyte will be a 2/4, for example. That actually isn't too bad of a body. Even defense-wise, it's pretty decent. It can block opposing Toolcraft Exemplars. And then if it's a Toolcraft Exemplar, it'll automatically equip to it and then get +3/+3 from the ability when it attacks, so it'll swing in for 4. So I think that Inventor's Apprentice is probably the best one to hook it up to, because then it's +2/+3, and you have a 3/5 body, which actually survives a lot of the removal in the format. So again, Weapons Trainer and Reckless Bushwhacker are the best cards in the deck. We're also running Stonehaven Outfitter, another Artificer, so the Inventor's Goggles automatically equips to it. So, for example, if you cast a Stonehaven Outfitter, it the Inventor's Goggles equipped to it, they then kill it, you will then get to at least draw a card. Equipped creatures also get +1/+1, and so the Toolcraft Exemplar especially is going to go big very, very quickly. A lot of the vehicles decks are like Toolcraft Exemplar, and they do attack in for 3 the turn after. But I think that the vehicle decks are a little bit easier to shut down with kind of the single target removal and just kind of slowing it down. I think that single target removal against a deck like this is going to be a little bit worse. Especially since you don't have to waste a card to crew a card that then might subsequently be killed by all of the Grasp of Darkness and Harness Lightnings that exist in the format. I think that this deck is also viable. I think the red-white tokens and the red-white vehicles had the worst matchups versus decks that were running the sweeper cards like Kozilek's Return, and especially Weaver of Lightning. Weaver of Lightning was a difficult card to deal with, but there are ways around this in this deck to get bigger than what Weaver of Lightning can really compete with. And I'm going to have like the Stasis Snares and the Declaration of Stones in the sideboard as answers. We also will have Lantern Scout, which I think against the other aggro decks, this is kind of the card that will put us over the top. Everything gains lifelink, and whenever an ally, which again, we have lots of allies in this deck, enters the battlefield, they gain lifelink until end of turn. We'll have the Firemantle Mage and the Chasm Guide. One gives haste and the other one gives menace, with this kind of sub-ally theme as well. Fragmentizes are still in here for the choppers. Stasis Snares are still in here for like the white flash type decks. Fragmentizes can also kill Stasis Snares, so there is that interaction as well. So again, I think this is a great budget version to pick up. Most of these cards are uncommons and commons. We do have with the exception of the rares from the Stonehaven Outfitter and the Pia Nalaars. Pia Nalaar also is an artificer, so this can be hooked up to the Inventor's Goggle to create a 3/4 and then a 1/1 Thopter behind. So I think we're going to be surprised about the interaction with the goggles. Equipping for 2 is a little bit of a difficulty, but a lot of the times that's not going to be a problem later on. I'm sure we might even cast the Inventor's Goggles first turn, or go like a Expedition Envoy first turn, and then a Toolcraft Exemplar second turn, and then Inventor's Goggles first, then hook it up, and then swing in for 2. That might just be a better play. I'll have to play it out and see what the right scenarios are. So the 21 lands are probably the right number, just the 4 of Aether Hubs, Inspiring Vantage, Needle Spires to fix, and then 4 and 5, 4 mountains and 5 plains, I think is the right call. So let's queue this up in some 2-mans to see how well it does, and maybe we'll do changes as it progresses. This has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching.